to Reaching New Heights. We welcome you to the show, Reaching New Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know with Troy Bell, the city manager, City of Muskegon Heights. I'm always excited to be here on Wednesdays and share this time with the community. I want to welcome to our show Dan Sorick with Prine and Newhoff. Did I pronounce that correct?
You did. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Beautiful. He is joining our show today as a guest. We tried to get him on before, but we were working around his schedule and it didn't quite work out. So if you remember, I think it was a couple shows ago, we were hoping to get him in. And so now we have succeeded in getting him not remotely, but in the flesh.
In the flesh. That's right.
Yeah. And as you can tell, we both saw the memo. So purple is the color of the day. So we're all good. We're all good. But before we get started with Dan, I do want to run down some of the happenings and goings on in Muskegon Heights. Quick updates. As you may be aware, if you're not aware, we had a council meeting this past Monday where we were able to approve, in addition to some expenditures for repairs, the sale of the properties that were part of the foreclosure process, the tax foreclosure process. We had two auctions. The first auction was limited to those people who are residents of Muskegon Heights or had a business in Muskegon Heights. The second auction was open to everybody. And out of the 23 properties that we retained as part of our first right of refusal, we were successful in auctioning 18 of those properties. And now we have 18 new property owners that are moving towards the closure process. They have to close so that we can transition the deeds, of course. And so they should be off and running, which is another exciting time in Muskegon Heights. This is the second year that we've done it. And I think we improved this year over last year in our processes and getting the word out. And I'm excited to say that out of the $104,000 that we had to pay for those properties to the county, we received $167,000 worth of successful bids. The council allowed us to budget $60,000 from this year to be able to cover the cost of purchasing these properties. And of that $60,000, we only ended up using a net of $5,000 of that $60,000. So we have replenished that fund effectively to be able to be used next year to affect this process. And so I'm excited to say, that we had about, out of that $167,000, we had about $38,000 that's dedicated to prepaid taxes for 3 years on each of those properties. So we know that those properties should not be coming back in foreclosure for any reason for the next 3 years. So that's good. We'll keep that on the tax rolls. And a lot of this is about making sure that we replenish our tax rolls, but more importantly, that we give the folks from our community an opportunity, residents, business owners, to have first shot at these properties. And it's all part of that self-determination thing that we've talked about on many of these shows. But to also allow, because the focus of anybody who purchases, whether they're residents or not, is to rehab these properties for home ownership. And we are focused on transitioning people from being renters into homeowners. And this is just another one of the pieces of our overall strategy that is designed to create generational wealth by taking people who are part of this community and part of the fiber of Muskegon Heights and giving them the chance to transition to homeowners and thus be part of the renaissance, to be part of the wealth, to be part of the opportunity that's being generated by the resurgence of this community. And so out of this process, we did bring in approximately $19,000 in surplus that can be used for future purposes. But we also recovered about $20,000 in revenue that was lost over the last 3 years on top of the lost taxes. So what I'm excited about in this project is not only are we accomplishing our objectives with regard to our residents, but we were also able to do it in a way that's sustainable so that next year we can come back and do this again and again, and provide that opportunity to our residents year after year. And so it wasn't perfect this year around, but we did improve on next year. So I'm looking forward to the. I'm sorry, we improved on last year, but next year I think we're going to be even better. There's some things that we need to tweak, and we have a year to do that, and so that should be um, exciting for next year to be able to do this again and do it better than we did it last year. And by the way, when you heard me talk about being at the ICMA conference, again, this is something that other communities are aspiring to do, larger communities, communities with more resources. And so the fact that we were able to pull this together and do it with the limited resources that we have, the limited staffing, and to still be able to take that step in the direction of self-determination for our community. I am proud of what the staff has done, and I'm proud of the way that the community responded to this, because controlling our destiny is also about controlling the land. And that is a vital part of where we need to be as a strong community in Muskegon Heights. Some other updates. You may have heard that we have entered into an agreement with Enterprise Fleet Management. So we will be replenishing the vehicles that are long overdue, outdated. Some are 14, 15, 20 years old, and replacing them with newer vehicles at a lower operating cost for the city. So we'll be getting better vehicles and brand new vehicles, and then cycling them out in a maintenance cycle that will help us reduce our cost in fuel, because the old vehicles are less fuel efficient than the new vehicles, but also reduce our cost of maintenance, because once the manufacturer warranty expires, we're paying for the maintenance of the vehicles. And by strategically and intelligently cycling and managing our fleet, we're able to reduce our costs, but also provide better vehicles that are much more representative of the image that we want to display as an up and coming community that's reaching new heights. So um, I've been informed by Enterprise that we should be receiving delivery of our first pickup truck and an Equinox, however you pronounce that, tomato, here within the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited to see the first brand new replacement vehicles that has been done in a long time here in Muskegon Heights. So there will be some fanfare associated with that, and that's coming. So stay tuned on that. Um, we're doing a number of improvements in our technology system, um, our financial system. We've been with them for about 10 years, and realizing that there are aspects of that software that we have not been taking advantage of. We have not been as efficient as we possibly could be, and with reduced staffing, we have to leverage technology to be able to get some of the things that need to be done in order to provide the basic level of services to the community that the community deserves. And so part of those software enhancements are a new payroll time card system, a new business licensing module. In addition to that, we're also looking at improving the paper processes. We want to eliminate as much of the paper as possible by scanning things in and attaching them. That reduces our paper load and also allows us to take advantage of having documents attached directly in the system so that they're instantly available, as opposed to having to go offsite to file cabinets out in other rooms and pull things up. And so managing that is going to make us a lot better in the process. And then we're also talking about moving to a fully enterprise system that's out in the cloud, and that will, if we're able to make that transition, in addition to better utilizing the software that we have, that will make us leaps and bounds more effective and more efficient by having all of the data in one place and accessible to all the different modules from one basic database. And finally, we are still in the process of doing our website refresh. Hasn't been done in a number of years, so we want to put a new face on our community, one that is reflective of the changes that we've made and the strides that we're making. And so I think you'll see here soon a new website that has a new look to it and is much more user friendly, that provides the data that you're looking for on a regular basis at your fingertips, like agendas and minutes. And if you want to tune into a meeting, you should be able to do 2 clicks and be able to get the information, to be able to go to a hyperlink and be able to participate in our Zoom meetings. So things like that are on the horizon. So I'm excited about that. If you didn't come to or participate in our last council meeting, we presented a road plan, and I'm excited about that. A plan that we have put in place to be able to look at strategically how we address the need for road improvements. And that's one of the things I'm going to come to Dan with here in just a second. But a new way of looking at it, we know that there's 3 basic types of work that we do on our roads: full reconstruction, milling and paving, which is basically removing the asphalt and replacing it, coming back with new pavement, asphalt pavement, and then crack and seal, where we're sealing the cracks to prevent them or mitigate the opportunity for water to get in and then freeze and thaw and freeze, which is what contributes to the potholes. So those are the 3 major activities that we do with regard to road work. And what we've done is presented a plan that says over the next 5 years, and color coded, each year has a different color, a map that shows all of the road reconstruction. And then a second map that shows all of the milling and paving throughout the city for 5 years, all the roads that require milling and paving. And then a third map that shows all of the crack and seal work. So each year we should be doing road reconstruction, milling and paving, and crack and seal work. And based on that plan, the estimate was approximately $5 to $6 million a year to be able to do that. And if we stay on that plan, we only showed in those maps 5 years, because when you go out 20 years, it's too much to show on one map. But if we stay on that cycle for the 5 years, every year out to 20 years, we should be able to address all of the road issues in Muskegon Heights. Now, do I want to wait 20 years? No. And I know you as residents don't want to wait 20 years, but at least we have a plan and we know how much it's going to cost. And the only thing that's really standing in the way is the money and coming up with the revenue and the funds to be able to do that. And so if we're able to spend $10 million a year, we can cut that down from 20 years to 10 years, so on and so forth. And so it's all about finding the revenue and the funds at this point in order to be able to do that. But at least we have the plan in place that says that based on the condition of the roads, this is what we identify as the priority and move through those priorities. Now, whenever you do that, there are going to be people who are happy because their road is on there for next year, and then there are going to be people who are not happy. And so what we've done with this plan is, from an engineering standpoint, look at the condition of the road and prioritize based on the condition and not the politics associated with it, but the engineering design associated with the strategy to be able to address that. So with that, I'm going to segue into why I've invited Dan to come on board, because when we talk about having the funding, we know the roads need to be done. And nobody's blind to that. And our vehicles are certainly not blind to it. The challenge is in finding the funding. So we've talked about roads because that's what we see, that's what we feel every day. But underneath the roads is another hidden priority, and that is our water and sewer system.
Correct. Yeah. Right. Yeah. They're forgotten about because they're unseen.
Right.
Unless there's a problem.
Exactly. And if I'm not mistaken, and you've done a lot of work over a number of years, how long has it been since you did your first project in Muskegon Heights?
I believe about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. Yeah.
So over 8 years of working with the city on various projects,
Mhm.
you have a sense of what the need is, where we are. I know a big part of that was the SAW grant,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
And talk about the SAW grant for our listeners, if you wouldn't
Sure.
mind.
The SAW grant, we started that back in, it started about 2014,
Hmm.
and it was an analysis. It took us a long time, but it took us about 3 years, but we got through the entire sanitary collection system and the stormwater collection system.
Hmm.
So SAW stood for sanitary and wastewater, stormwater and wastewater asset management.
Okay.
And we identified where everything is and the size, the material.
Hmm.
We collected all the record drawings and the maps, and we put it all into a digital system, and we assessed everything from a condition standpoint. So we got eyes on a lot of things, or as much as we could, and we put a rating to the whole stormwater system and the sanitary sewer network.
Okay.
So we mapped out all the pipes,
Hmm.
and we assigned.
That's a huge undertaking.
It was a
Isn't
very large
it?
undertaking.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we got to understand a lot of things, and I think it allows the city to make good long-term decisions with the stormwater and the sanitary system. When it comes to, where you see drainage problems, or you might see a sinkhole that develops in the middle of the street.
Right.
Why did that sinkhole get
Hmm.
created? Especially even in the frustrating things when it occurs on a brand new street that just got resurfaced sometimes.
Right. Mhm.
So we have identified where we believe, where the worst problems are, and try to rate them and
Mhm.
the consequence of failure. So we built that asset management plan, with the city.
Mhm.
We did that. I think that was completed it started in 2014. We completed it in 2017.
Mhm.
And again, we got through as much of the
3
system
years.
as we could.
Right.
And that set up a lot of hopefully a lot of decisions, that are based on, the road conditions and things of that nature. Because we don't want to replace a road where there's failing infrastructure underneath the road.
Right.
Yeah, because they do contribute sometimes to the condition of the road.
And I know that was one of the complaints that we got about Sherman Street,
Mhm.
and we put in a brand new road, and shortly thereafter there was a couple of sinkholes and
Mhm.
low spots on that, and that was due, I believe, to stormwater issues, right?
Correct. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
And so, unfortunately, those were things that were unforeseen, unanticipated, obviously, that are below the surface. And as we go forward, we want to try to, with the funds that we have available. And I know
Right.
that was part of, great. We got a $3 million grant to do Sherman Street, but we had, potentially $5 million worth of work that we would
Yeah.
have liked to have done if we had $5 million to go in and address all of the stormwater and sanitary issues that were there. We focused primarily on water, if I'm not mistaken.
We did take over a couple of stormwater and a couple of
Okay.
sanitary issues, but yeah,
Okay.
we did do a lot of water
Right.
issues. Yeah.
Right. And so I think the key to what you're saying is the SAW grant gave us access to information
Correct.
to know what's there, know what the
Mhm.
condition of it, and give us the data that we
Mhm.
can then use strategically to decide where our priorities are.
Correct.
Very similar to what we're talking about in the road project.
Correct. Yes.
So now we're in a position to look at road
Mhm.
priorities and water and sewer priorities, and then overlay those two
Mhm.
to be able to go after grant money,
Mhm.
to then be able to fix the pipes underneath, and also benefit from improving the roads at the same time.
Yeah, there's a lot of buckets of money.
Mhm.
We've got the sewer funds, you got the water funds, you got the road funds,
Right.
and so just replacing roads. You mentioned,
Mhm.
a price tag per year for the next 5 years.
Mhm.
That's not counting, underlying utility work
Right. Right.
that comes out of different buckets of money, and
Mhm.
those have, significant costs as well. And there's other sources of money and other sources of grant money,
Mhm.
and some of those grant monies do cover some of the road costs as well. So
Mhm.
that's, and that's what we're shooting for, is all the different grant
Right.
programs, and in using the resources as wisely as possible.
Absolutely. That's excellent. And I can't overemphasize that having a plan puts you so much further ahead of the process. And
Correct.
in order to have a plan, you have to have the data and the information. So we're in a position now with a plan to then be able to go out there and look for those buckets of money,
Mhm.
to be able to bring those to the community to get some of these things done. And the art or skill around this is, once you have the plan, is to be diligent and doing some of the things that you are doing for the community with Prime a new office. All right, we know that this bucket of money is out there, and we know that this need is in our plan. Now, how do we align the pieces of our plan to the buckets of money that are available?
Right. And it there is some times where you have to pivot in the sand
Hmm.
to just uh, because another priority might creep up. You know,
Right.
another issue might pop up. And unfortunately, I've built many capital improvement plans from several different communities,
Sure.
and having the plan is always, to fall back on to go to that plan. But
Hmm.
there's always certainly some things that you need to address that pop up and can at times delay that plan. But having that plan and keeping going back to that plan as best as you can is always
Right.
a high priority.
And I've seen over the years and the work that I've done in various communities when the federal government gets involved, they love this thing called shovel ready, right? Because that means that whatever money that they allocate in their minds will get to the need as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
And oftentimes the politics of that mean that if we get it to the need quickly, then we're thankful more quickly,
Right.
for lack of a better way of saying it, and therefore that results in appreciation at the polls. And so that's the way that formula works, whether we like it or not. That's the reality of it. But there may be some other benevolent purposes behind it, but that's the nuts and bolts of it. So shovel ready comes from having those plans in place.
Correct. Yes. And it takes time. I mean, as I mentioned, it took us 3 years to get through the
3 years,
stormwater and the
right?
sanitary system. And those plans were in place, in 2017. But again, it still takes time
Right.
to find the buckets of money and to align everything with the roads, with the sewers, with the water main. And, the drinking water is another, big
Hmm.
concern. And
Right.
there's been a lot of changes just in the last 5 years on drinking water and rules and regulations that apply to cities
Hmm.
and you being a water supplier and all the new rules and regulations
Hmm.
that are now applied to you just since just again in the last 5 years.
And when you say you, the city of
The city of
Muskegon
Muskegon
Heights,
Heights.
and you're referring to the water filtration plant, one of the
Yes.
jewels of Muskegon Heights, that gives us access to water from the lake
Hmm.
and allows us to be able to be self-sufficient in that regard. But with that uh, responsibility comes regulations.
Correct.
And as everybody's heard, lead is a big issue. In many communities, I think the biggest one that we broke in the media was Flint.
Correct.
But it wasn't just, and Flint had some unique issues that they were dealing with their water source and how that affected their infrastructure. But
Hmm.
every community in Michigan needs to be aware of it. And I think that's why the state said, hey, in 20 years, we need to be done with lead.
Right.
Right. Unfortunately for communities like us, don't have a trunk of money sitting in the bank waiting just to be used for lead. That meant that we had to find strategic ways to be able to meet the mandate, the unfunded mandate
Correct.
of getting rid of the lead. And I think the state understands that, and that's why these buckets of money are becoming available. But before we talk more about lead service and the projects that are underway, just kicked off, what would you say is the condition of our existing water mains? I mean, when I say condition, how old are the pipes that we're looking at in Muskegon Heights? I mean,
From the records that we've seen, the city was founded roughly 1890.
Mhm.
And I have a 1918 map, a beautiful 1918 map of
1980.
the city and all of its mains.
A few years before I came along.
Just a couple.
Yeah.
And right before I went to school. But yeah, and it shows pretty much all of the infrastructure already constructed just in that short window of
Wow.
28 years
Mhm.
between 1890 when
Right.
the city was founded and 1918. So many of the mains that are in the streets today are still from 1918 or
Wow.
prior to. We don't know. We don't have an exact year.
Mhm.
Um,
So we're talking about close to 100 years old.
Oh, well, over, yes,
Mm-hmm.
well over 100 years
Yeah,
old.
at minimum.
Much of the infrastructure, underground infrastructure, is
Mm-hmm.
is definitely over 100 years old.
Right.
Um, the the city had a drinking water system
Mm-hmm.
that was pulling from wells off of Broadway
Okay.
before the filtration plant was constructed in 1940. So
That's a
it
good
was.
bit of history there.
Oh,
Mhm.
I'm very familiar with the
Yeah,
history here.
I'm
It's
loving it.
yeah, I love it too.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to see these old maps because you understand why they were built the way they were, because they
Mhm.
had streetcars on several of the streets. On Sanford and on Peck there were streetcars, and that's
Wow.
why on
Mhm.
Peck there's two sewer mains, one on each side of the street,
Mhm.
because they didn't want to go under the streetcar tracks. So things
Mhm.
of that nature.
Right.
It's really fascinating to see that history.
Mhm.
But yeah, the system is pretty old. Um,
It seems like they did.
Relatively speaking, though, they built
Yeah,
it.
I was gonna say.
They
Yeah.
did a really good job of building it.
Mhm.
The one thing that the one I guess risk that the city has on its drinking water system
Mhm.
is something we've talked about before. Is the shallowness of it,
Right.
and it was something that we just didn't understand a civilized society yet.
Mhm.
That when you scrape off that snow off the roads, because we weren't driving, not everybody had a car in
Mhm.
1918, and we weren't scraping the roads regularly every time it snowed.
Mhm.
We didn't fully yet understand as a society that the frost goes deeper in the road than it does outside the road, where it's
Mhm.
insulated by the snow.
Mhm.
And the water mains today are buried at 5 feet deep, and back then they were buried 2 to 3 feet deep. So
Wow.
there's and that's not just here in the Heights. I mean, that's
Mhm.
in other old communities like that too.
And the deeper it is, the more protected it is from the frost. Right?
Correct. Right.
The warmth of the earth.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Protects. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the biggest. I think the biggest risk to the drinking water system is freezing.
Mhm.
And it's really the water services. The water mains themselves don't typically freeze. It's the
Mhm.
connections, the smaller diameter water
Right.
services that will freeze first.
Mhm.
And there was a big problem about 2014, 2015. We had a really bitterly cold winter, and
Mhm.
the city experienced a lot of frozen services that year. I think there
Right.
was 2 winters in a row, actually.
Wow.
But other than that,
Mhm.
the drinking water system is very sound.
Mhm.
The pipes are in great shape, even for
Right.
the age that they are.
Mhm.
Um, it's a pretty good functioning system.
Oh, it's good to hear. And I know with the information and data that you have from SAW that we have begun to put together a plan for how we can address the issues that we have found with mains.
Yeah.
And I believe one or two of the projects that we received was at $7 million worth of funding,
Mhm.
of which $5 million was a grant.
Correct.
And Prine and Newhoff put together that application and that process that succeeded in us getting access to that $7 million. And the difference between the 7 and the 5 is a loan, a
Right.
long-term loan, and that's at what, 2%?
It's not even 2%. It's 1 point. Yeah, it's 1 7/8, I think, over 20 years.
Over 20 years, which
Yep.
is fantastic.
Yep.
Considering where interest rates are going today. The fact that we got in under the gun on
Yes.
that is a great accomplishment for the city. And so thank you for the time and effort that you put in and providing that professional service to our community. But in that $5 million grant, $7 million total, there are some water main projects in that. Right? Can you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So the first round of water main that we're going to be replacing is down on 7th and 8th Street,
Mhm.
south of Summit.
Okay.
So between Summit and Oakwood,
Mhm.
that's where we saw a lot of concentration of frozen water services
Mhm.
back in 2014, 2015.
Okay.
So we targeted that area because we knew there were some shallow mains there.
Mhm.
And not always does that frozen service, reveal itself to the surface because of the beautiful sand that you have here.
Right.
It soaks in, but
Mhm.
and that does play a part in the road condition
Mhm.
because it creates that saturation level of the road base,
Mhm.
and it's almost like driving on a waterbed.
Right. Right.
So the pavement's not going to last very long
Mhm.
when it's saturated like that. But we're targeting 7th and 8th Street between Summit and Oakwood.
Mhm.
There's a larger main on Oakwood, and we're going to replace all the services along with that. And I'm excited to get that project started. And because of the narrowness of the road,
Right.
this is a water main funded this is coming from the state water
Mhm.
main funded, but it's also paying for, because we have to replace every water service
Mhm.
and the density of the homes through there. Um, the pavement, the curb,
Mhm.
everything was eligible to be grant funded or funded as part of the project. So we're replacing the entire road as well.
That's
So of
beautiful.
those three elements that you mentioned before for road
Mhm.
rehab is it's a full reconstruction of the road, new curb, new
Right.
asphalt, new road base.
Mhm. And I remember when we first started talking about what projects that we were going to prioritize, and of all the stuff that needs to be done, and there's a lot that needs to be done.
Mhm.
We're just chipping away at the tip of the iceberg. I remember the look that you gave me when I said, "Well, in addition to the priorities around pipe, can we also prioritize those roads that need it the most?"
Correct. Yep.
And what I appreciated about your response is, well, you had already been thinking about that. Mhm.
Yes, because those roads they're not in the best condition,
Mhm.
and we're certainly, there might be some areas where the water main could be worked on, but the roads are in great shape. So
Right.
it's not uh, the risk to the community. We're trying to do this from a business risk standpoint as
Mhm.
well, and with the best use of the money and the resources available. So 7th and 8th Street are
Mhm.
targeted for next year
And
for
that goes
construction.
back.
We've been talking about this for many years, but it's so nice to see it actually coming together.
It's happening.
Absolutely.
And that's a theme that unfortunately has been a bane to Muskegon Heights, is that that there are a lot of good conversations,
Mhm.
and a number of them result in promises and things that we're gonna do, that the residents have been waiting for years and years to happen.
Mhm.
And so I get it. I mean, people are tired of hearing it's gonna happen.
Right.
They want to see it happen.
Right.
And so I know you're excited, but I
Mhm.
can imagine that the residents that have been here for 50, 70, some odd years are really going to say, finally, finally
And
something's happening.
I understand that.
Mhm.
Until you see that excavator show up on the
Right,
street
right.
and the road finally getting removed,
Just talk.
it's still just talk. I understand, but we now have we have contracts in place. We have a contractor coming in.
Hmm.
Um, I'm very much looking forward to
Hmm.
as soon as the weather breaks next spring to
Right.
for this work to get
To rock,
underway.
to rock and roll.
Absolutely.
And this is all possible through the creative ways of going after funding,
Hmm.
by being strategic in the way that we plan to address road and water issues at the same time, to be able to address that $5 million a year, which is the most visible priority for the community, but at the same time make the difficult decisions that will allow us to address the underlying needs, so that 10 years down the road, we don't have pipes that are breaking and
Right.
water running everywhere. And because we ignored the underlying issues just because we were prioritizing the surface issues.
Correct.
Not the surface is superficial, but you can see that there's a theme there. There's some hard work, difficult choices about what's underground, that we can align with what's above ground to be able to do both at the same time.
Right.
And I think we're always better when we can kill two birds with one stone.
Or
And
three.
that's right. Yes, that's right. Make it skip. Boom,
That's
boom,
right.
boom. Yeah. So that's the $7 million. And so,
Mhm.
and we've talked about this on the show a little bit, that when we went out to bid, the bids came back, inflation, COVID, supply chain issues. We came back with bids that were well above what we had wanted or anticipated. And so we took a gamble. All right.
We did.
Yes. And can you talk about that gamble?
Sure. When we put these project estimates together, it was 2+ years ago.
Mhm.
And we did not anticipate, 10, 15% inflation and
Right.
material delays and cost increases and labor delays and things of that nature. Price of fuel,
Mhm.
that all crept up in the last 2 years.
Mhm.
So one of the projects that we had bid was Leahy from Sherman to Barney.
Mhm.
And that project was bid. We took a look at, we had already submitted an application for the next round of funding
Mhm.
for fiscal 23 from the state, and
With no guarantees
with
that
no
that it
guarantees.
would be funded.
Right. We had already put a package together, and we talked with the state, and we asked if we could take this Leahy project that came in over budget.
Mhm.
They all came in over budget, and just Leahy worked out with the numbers. If we just postpone this for a couple of months, funding wise,
Right.
what would it? What's the risk? The risk is that the city couldn't get it funded.
Mhm. The state
We
would
were,
say no.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we were fairly confident that the city had scored well on its
Mhm.
application, that it would get some funding, and we asked the state if we could just roll in another 3 million on
Mhm.
Leahy into our previous application already. And yes, okay, let's do that. So what ended up working out was it's to be confirmed yet, but
Right.
the early indications it won't be a $7 million project with $5 million grant. It'll be a $3 million project with a $3 million grant.
Right.
So the gamble paid off
Mhm.
immensely to the
Yes.
point where the entire project is going to be funded through a grant and principal forgiveness. So, and the beautiful thing about it is that it's not going to delay the construction of it.
Right.
It'll still occur in 2023.
Mhm.
So that will be the other project that we'll be working on as well.
And just I want to explain the way the drinking water revolving loan fund works. I mean, you can see in the name it says loan fund, and so that program has been in place for years, where communities could go to the state with projects, and the state would provide the umbrella funding through issuing bonds that would allow the cities to borrow, to be able to do priority projects that needed to be done, but they didn't necessarily have the funds available to do it, and pay those monies off over years at a much reduced interest rate.
Right.
And so that's great, but it is not as great as a grant.
Correct.
Right. And because you don't want to burden your community with loans that you have to pay off, years after we're said and gone. And so what I think Dan has pointed out, which is what is really amazing and needs to be applauded about this situation, is the gamble was that we would be able to get a loan for that $3 million. And what we happened into was, no, it's not a loan. It's fully funded grant, forgivable, at least for what they're telling us so far. It hasn't been confirmed, which is excellent. But it even gets better than that, right?
It does, because I know we've all talked about Flint a lot, and the what happened there with the lead in the water.
Right.
But the eternal optimist in me, I think it showed that it really drew a lot of attention to the needs of this, not only Flint, of course,
Right.
and communities that don't have the resources,
Right.
but it's a nationwide systemic problem with our infrastructure and the forgotten about water systems. So what it did, it focused a lot of legislators, both state and now national,
Right.
to understand that we need more infrastructure money to help out communities. And the gamble was, or not the gamble, but the timing worked out right with some, additional, monies from the state and federal legislature to go into supporting grants on this drinking water revolving fund, so that it's not all loan. So there's that, and as a part of that application that I mentioned, we're also going to be doing some work on Fifth Street and on Sanford. Sanford's another. Now we're talking 2024 construction with those projects,
Right.
But again, it takes time, and it's I fully understand the impatience of residents of, we want to see the action now, but it does take time, and there's a lot of people working on this and getting it rolling. And it's more than just Brian and New office and your office. There's a lot of other people working on this.
Yes. Highly skilled folks who
absolutely, that are working on many different buckets of money to find for these projects. So we're looking forward to those projects to be done in 2024.
And I'm going to go back and mention again, those 2024 projects required a plan.
Correct.
and it required the data and information that came from the SAW project to be able to identify the priorities and put together the projects that made sense for what we're trying to achieve. And so um, some folks might say, why did you put all this effort in 2 years ago to putting together this project list of, I think it was 16, 18 projects back then, of things that need to be done 4 or 5 years from now, when we need to worry about today. But that advanced planning allowed us to put those projects together for 2024, which looks like we're going to get, what, $8 million, 8.3?
Another additional $8 million grant
Yes.
to fund those projects as well.
And there's road work associated with that.
Correct. Yep.
So when we go back and talk about that $5 million daunting number of what it's going to cost for us to do our roads, we're chipping away at that $5 million that we would have to come up otherwise with strategic ways of these grants that will allow us to do pieces of that, not all the $5 million, but it may not end up being $5 million when it's done, because of the things that your firm is doing to help us find the monies to do these other projects that the government has prioritized, that may not be road projects per se,
right,
but are critical in terms of drinking water and sewer. So I love to see, being an engineer, you step back and you plan and you collect data, and you project what could happen potentially, and to be able to see it begin to come together. When you take that risk to put the time and effort into something today that you won't see for another year,
right,
2 years, 2 years.
Yeah, and I've been blessed and had the pleasure to work with the city for a number of years now, and it's really fun and exciting for me to see this come to fruition, and to see, the new pavement and the new grass growing, and I'm really looking forward to that and seeing it all the way through.
Well, I appreciate the way that you compliment the city manager and those that have come before.
Absolutely.
But yes, I'm excited. I get chills every time I think about where we started and where we are now, and what's coming. And so $11.3 million altogether.
Yeah, I think 11.4 million for 2024. Yeah, and that's covering. It's not all road construction. It's not all going to a contractor to put down asphalt. It's not all going into concrete or pipe.
Right.
It's covering the cost of the engineering. It's covering the cost of the legal fees and the financial fees. I mean, there's a lot of other fees, professional service fees, that are also included in these projects and are covered under these grants as well.
And if you look at the plans that Prine and Newhoff has put together to address the water issues and the opportunities for funding there, and as I started off, the plan that we just announced that Metro Consulting's put together for how to address the streets in an organized way moving forward, and the fact that the two firms have collaborated in looking at, well, if you're doing street projects and you're doing water projects, how can we work together and sequencing those projects that make sense. I like the collaboration there, and not every firm is willing to do that, and some firms are very territorial, and I commend both Metro Consulting and your firm, Prine and Newhoff, for working together for the benefit of the community. And so I think that's excellent stuff. And we haven't even touched on the DWAM.
The Drinking Water Asset Management Grant. So
how much was that?
That was, I think, 600,000, 675,000, 650,000, something like that.
Something in that neighborhood.
And that's basically covering the cost of your water asset management plan. We talked about SAW, which was stormwater and wastewater. Now this is drinking water.
Right.
So we're working through that project right now also to put together that long-term water asset management. That isn't just pipes. It isn't just lead services. It's also pumps, storage tanks, your filtration plant, and long-term asset management in those facilities as well.
Beautiful. And that's
$650,000. And that's
of a loan?
No, that would be a grant.
All a grant.
Another grant.
And so that's going to give us the information so that we have the data to be able to put together the plans that make us eligible or put us in a good position to be able to go after the funding to do the work.
Correct. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Tough decisions and strategy today that benefit us down the road. That's the theme. In case you hadn't seen that, I was weaving through this whole thing.
And there's a lot of tough decisions.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Right. And I appreciate the community for their patience. Like I said, I understand how the residents have been made promises and haven't seen action. And so it's time. And time is now. And this is all part of what we talk about when we talk about reaching new heights is, setting those plans in motion so that the actions follow thereafter. So
Mhm.
so we've talked about the DWAM, we've talked about the revolving loan fund. Anything else that you see on the horizon of opportunity?
Well, I mean, it's going to be looking at continued long range funding
Mhm,
for additional possible loan or
mhm,
grants. Put together a package for 2025, 2026,
mhm,
and beyond. There's another application due November 1st for the next round of sewer and drinking water revolving fund, and we could
mhm.
address maybe some more sewer items as well in the next round. And that's what we're targeting, especially some of those items that we picked
Mhm.
up in that SAW grant. So
Right. And I just realized we missed the improvements to the data collection process.
okay.
Right. You want to talk about that before we wrap up?
Well, data collection, we're doing it with we do it with GIS
Mhm,
and picking up everything
mhm.
with GPS points
Right.
and data collectors, and
Mhm,
it's all stored into a GIS system that
mhm,
and we're going to be opening that up to
mhm.
access so that your staff can see it all and
See the
see
information.
the information
Right.
and yeah, and work orders and
Mhm.
organizing the workflow and
Right.
all of that. So that's also coming out of that drinking water asset management grant.
All right. And in addition to the data collection and modernizing, we're also modernizing the way that we handle our water meters, right?
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
Yes, I see where you're going. Yes. Well, a number of years ago, we replaced all the water meter, or nearly every single water meter in the
Mhm.
city,
Right.
which that right there saved the city quite a bit of money because I mean I know it was a very costly you know you
Mhm.
know venture to do that,
Right.
but it saves accounting
Mhm.
in terms of the water because some of the water was being lost with those old meters.
Mhm.
So now people are being billed correctly for the actual water they're actually using.
Mhm.
But now we're looking at a modern system where we're going to convert all that to a automatic meter interface
Mhm.
system where those meters automatically talk to a central location.
Mhm.
It's a smart metering thing. That's what some people will call it,
Mhm.
but it's been going on for years in the electric and the gas industry, and now the water industry is picking it up, and it'll be the automatic data collection will be coming right into the computer.
Mhm.
No longer will there be a need to go out and read meters.
Driving around, reading meters
Correct.
or sight
And
reading
I
meters.
personally have walked the routes in this wonderful
Oh yeah.
city. I have, and
Mhm.
it's got my steps in.
Mhm.
And
I know that's right.
it's been but now this will all be automatic. It'll be coming
Mhm.
into a radio system, and it'll be collecting all the data.
Right.
And your staff can instantly call upon a meter and get a reading right from their computer anytime.
Right. So this whole, if you've heard of data logging, where somebody's got to go out and connect to the meter and pull it into a computer and then spit something out, that piece is going to go away, right?
Somebody can do that right from their desktop.
Mhm.
And there's a portal there where their customers could even look into their own usage as well.
That's going to be sweet. So you can, log on to that portal and see how much water have I used. Is there potentially a leak because the amount of water I've used to date is higher than I've normally used to that date in the 30-day cycle before. So I imagine that that's going to allow folks to better manage their own usage, to be able
Correct.
to see it, to understand it, hopefully, and to be able to make decisions based on that. So,
And I overheard somebody today in
mm,
at City Hall
okay.
complaining about a high water bill, and
I think I heard that same thing.
it's a common
Mhm.
common situation in any community, every community,
Right.
and this information will allow a customer to be able to log in and see their own usage and even set an alarm so that they can get a text or a
Mhm.
notice or email that says you've got a normal usage. You
Mhm.
might want to look into your usage is something running and
Mhm.
it a more informed customer base
Right.
is also helpful too. So the customers can look up their own water usage and
Mhm.
monitor it. You've switched to monthly billing. which hopefully catches a leak or a problem before it becomes a really large water bill.
Right.
And now with this new system, you can catch it so that it could be done in a day
Right.
and catch a leak even in a
Mhm.
much shorter period of time.
I know where I lived before in South Florida, they had a system where I could set an alarm so that if there was an abnormal or an extended use at night when everybody's asleep,
Right.
there should not be, the meter should not be running when nobody's using anything. And it would give you an alarm the next day that said, hey, you had something that was running all night long. Sometimes it was one of my family members that left on the sprinkler system.
Oh, I have that family member too.
Right.
Named I don't know.
Right, exactly.
Yes, or not me.
That's right. I don't know who. Exactly. So I hope that we're able to get to that point, because that's, I think, a valuable service for our community. Well, I mean, thank you so much for joining us today. And
Thank you for having me.
Sharon.
I've been blessed, and it's a pleasure.
Excellent. And I hope to have you back as these projects begin to mature and to give us updates on where we are and how things are coming along. I believe in the projects that we've identified, there's 540 lead service line replacements.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's huge for the 540 some odd parcels that will be serving homes that now know that they have eliminated the potential for lead leaching into their water systems.
Right.
Not that we've had any issues to date yet, but that we proactively eliminating that worry. That's huge for the community.
Yes.
And thank you for the part that you play in that. So just a few quick announcements that I want to wrap up on before we say goodbye. I do want to mention that I didn't mention before that we are bringing online a new business licensing program. And so you're going to be hearing things if you have a business in Muskegon Heights, more interaction with the city clerk and city hall to be able to make sure that you're getting the services associated with business licensing, and that we are getting more timely payments of our business licensing here in Muskegon Heights. Also, I wanted to mention development projects. We are having a groundbreaking on October 3rd for the beginning of the first development in Muskegon Heights since 2004. We already have a house that started, individual house on Jarman and Hume, I believe it is. But on the corner of Delano and Ray Street, October 3rd at noon, please, everybody come out. We're going to have a groundbreaking on the multiple lot construction development that is kicking off on October 3rd. There'll be hard hats and shovels and a reception afterwards. So we invite the community to come out and celebrate something that hasn't happened in almost 19 years in Muskegon Heights. And so this is huge for us. You've heard me talking about it, and now we're beginning the process of digging that hole. And you'll be able to see the different models and the layouts of what is coming as we start to develop all these vacant lots that we have, which will replenish our tax base, but also address the blight issues. So again, that's killing two birds with one stone, or three birds. So whenever we can have that type of win-win-win, that's something to be celebrated. So remember, October 3rd at noon on Delano and Ray Street. And Ms. Ross put in the chat, mentioned the voting registration and absentee events Tuesday, October 4th at Summit Square from 10 to 4. So you'll be able to come in and complete your absentee votes. Wednesday, October 5th at the US Cafe, at the US Cafe from 10 to 4. And then on Tuesday, October 11th at Columbia Court from 10 to 4. And Wednesday, October 12th at East Park Manor from 10 to 4. And then Tuesday, October 18th at Roosevelt Apartments. I'm not sure what time the Roosevelt Apartment event is, but these are efforts that our new clerk is undertaking to do outreach as part of the voting process, not just waiting for residents to come to us, because we realize that there are many residents that don't have the mobility, that are older in age, that it's difficult for them to make it out of the house. And so instead of waiting for you to maybe or maybe not come to us at City Hall or at the different precincts, she has taken the initiative to go mobile with voter outreach for the absentee voting program. So take a note of that and make sure that you share that with anybody in these locations that you think would benefit from being able to do this in advance of the election, in a place that's much more convenient for them. And again, Ms. Ross, kudos for picking the number of sites and spreading it out throughout the whole community. In addition to that, I do want to say one last thought about schools. I know the schools have been in the press lately, some unfortunate circumstances, but what I want to urge everybody in the community to do is to come together. This is an unfortunate situation, but we can make it through it. If we come together, we collaborate, we work together, we have a common goal to bring good education, good quality education to Muskegon Heights. The one thing that I would encourage everybody to focus on is the importance of petitioning the governor to reduce the existing debt for the school. And if you've seen any of the statements that I put out, that $43.7 million worth of debt that is scheduled to be paid out to 2042, if I'm not mistaken, that is suffocating our community. That millage, if the governor or the legislature steps in like they have with other school districts, Benton Harbor, Detroit, to address those debt issues, that millage could be then transitioned to reduced and transition to addressing our $5 million need for road paving. And so economic development is stymied by that tax and by the weight of that debt. And if we can address that, that's going to buoy not only the city, but the school district. If we can fill these 1,000 vacant lots with homes, those are students to attend their school. That also gives us the eligibility to move away from having to have a charter entity and going back to a traditional public school. So this is on the horizon, and the potential for us to be able to address that is there, but we have to come together with a common message, a common objective, to point out that this $43.7 million worth of debt needs to go. All the other things I think will follow from that need to happen, but let's talk about that and let's make sure that we focus on getting that achieved. If there's nothing else, that we'll get that achieved. So with that, I will wrap up. I know we went long today. We unfortunately started a little bit late, so I felt okay about going a little bit long. But again, thank you for joining us at Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, City Manager, City of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so that you'll be in the know. Continue to be blessed, and thank you for tuning in. I think somebody fell asleep at the switch.
No, all clear.
Not yet.